SuperTalk Mississippi media production.
Whether you're looking to start a career with no student loans or change careers to land one of the happiest jobs in the world, yep, that's construction, Build Mississippi can help. Visit buildmississippi.com to learn why a career in the trades deserves another look. Buildmississippi.com. Your future is waiting.
This is Gerard Gibert, and thank you for listening to MidDays here on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Power your home or business with C Spire Fiber. To learn more, visit supertalk.fm/C Spire. C Spire Fiber powers SuperTalk Mississippi. Get ready to go beyond the headlines and join a meaningful conversation with people from around the state. You're listening to MidDays with Gerard Gibert here on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to MidDays, SuperTalk Mississippi. I'm your host, Gerard Gibert, along with Rhino in the Element Wealth Studio, guiding you through the middle of your day with facts, fodder, and fine music on this Hump Day. Well, I kicked over the trash can out in the hall. I had to pick that up. I had to get in the seat. Oh, my gosh. We are here, ready to go, all strapped in, a whole bunch of stuff going on, as you guys are well aware. What about the president and Elon Musk? Are they on the mend? I don't know, perhaps. I don't think the president thought too much of the insults, and now Elon Musk comes out and...
Well, publicly, the president hasn't thought much about it at all.
No, really, a very restrained response. While Musk was sort of playing out his tirade on his X platform, the president, however, just posted on his Truth Social. I'm seeing this on the television in the studio. Let me check it out here, Rhino. It concerns a pending deal, at least with China, with respect to trade. What is he saying here? Our deal with China is done, subject to final approval with President Xi and me. Full magnets and any necessary rare earths will be supplied up front by China. Likewise, we will provide to China what was agreed to, including Chinese students using our colleges and universities, in parentheses, which has always been good with me. In parentheses, we are getting a total of 55% tariffs. China is getting 10%. Relationship is excellent. Thank you for your attention to this matter. 55%? So, it's really hard to track. If you've attempted to, and I have, the last couple of days, read numerous accounts of the timeline of since Liberation Day, actually since the president was inaugurated. Liberation Day was the big one. What was that, April 7th, I believe, when he made the big announcement there at the White House concerning his tariff strategy and imposing tariffs, and then some of those were rescinded. Some of them were put on temporary pause. It depends on the products, the country. It's really pretty hard to track. But 55%, I think, would be an increase. I think we went from 10 to 30. It's kind of, if you look at the timeline of all the changes and adjustments in the tariff situation vis-a-vis China, specifically as it relates to China, I think we ended up going to 30, sort of paused there, pending these negotiations. 55. That's pretty stout. Now, the question is 55 on what products exactly. So there's no details in the post here. That remains to be seen. But the markets seem to be okay with it. You would think after that announcement you'd see a big swing one way or another in the markets. That's not happening. The Dow up 130, the NASDAQ about 30. So no big movements there with respect to the market. That's what he said. So remains to be seen what the final details look like in this agreement. He also was boasting about the CPI. Great numbers. Fed should lower 1 full point. Would pay much less interest on debt coming due. So important. All caps from the president. Now, it is true that inflation ticked up month over month, 0.1%, essentially level, flat. And annualized 2.4, still above the Fed's target of 2. So it still means prices are going up. They're just not going up as significantly from 1 year to the next, and then in this case, 1 month to the next. So that's where we are, though, on that. Now, I have noticed that oil has been trending upward the last few days. Last I checked, it was just under $65 a barrel. Wasn't too long ago, we were talking about $57, $58 a barrel oil. We'd seen a decline, and I'm not sure what's driving it upward at this point. Little surprised at that, honestly. The really haven't increased supply. We haven't seen the effects of deregulation from the Trump administration yet really take hold inside this country domestically. Some announcements yet, $66.08 right now, up $1.10 a barrel today. So that's going in the wrong direction if you want prices lower at the pump. And I've noticed they've ticked up a little bit last few days, and I suspect with the price of oil per barrel trending upward, we'll see some additional price increases. And I'm not sure if that's a demand supply or combination of the two function. I know that when we saw the prices falling not so long ago, reports were that Saudi Arabia had increased production. Really wasn't related to anything domestically. And then a decline in demand globally, primarily driven by economic problems in China, which consumes lots of oil. And, of course, it is a globally traded product. But that's where we are with respect to that. You shared with me something yesterday after the show, or it could have been on a break, about one of the Walmart heiresses getting involved this weekend, financially involved, to be specific, in... This would be Christy Walton, by the way. She's 76. There are scheduled a series of anti-Trump protests right now across the country, including here in the great state of Mississippi. Yeah. And so she
Over on High Street.
That's right. She is providing, along with some other billionaires who are speaking out against the president, they are investing in supporting, making capital investments, if you will, in supporting some of these protests, including taking out full-page ads in the New York Times, calling on the readers.
Full-page color ad.
Oh, wow, which is super expensive. In the Times, which is got to be one of the most expensive newspapers to run ads on in the country because of its readership.
I don't think she paid the full boat. That's over $1 million for the Sunday edition, but I'm fairly certain it's six figures or higher for a full-page color ad in the New York Times.
And so what they're calling on is readers to mobilize this coming Saturday, June 14th. You know, this is going to be a big celebration of the birthday, essentially, of the Army, U.S. Army. And he made that clear. He was going to have a big old celebration. 250 years, right? I believe that's what we're hitting, and that is all scheduled for Saturday. And so, in response to that, this No Kings movement, and that's what appears at the top of the ad, "No Kings." And that's really a reference to a political organization that's heavily engaged in anti-Trump protest and coordinating, organizing those for this Saturday, June the 14th. Same day, of course, the president, again, is slated to host a military parade in the nation's capital, Washington, D.C. So she's gotten involved in this, 76 years old. She's worth $19.3 billion. And so you're saying it's $1 million for such an ad in the New York Times?
It's over $1 million for the Sunday edition. I don't think this was in the Sunday edition.
Okay. Well,
Walmart has put out a statement, and just short of calling her the crazy one we don't talk to anymore, they have made sure to announce that she does not have any position on the board. She does not have any actual function within the Walmart empire. And if I'm not mistaken, she lives in Mexico.
Well, good for them. So, in other words, they're essentially telling the world that they are not associated with her to any respect. I mean,
I can read the full statement when we come back.
Well, good for them. But, this is so crazy. Just be rich and stay out of all this stuff. We're stepping aside for a break. It's Clifton Carroll, Executive Director of the Skills Foundation, coming up next. Hospital in Collins, where your health matters.
Gerard Gibert. He keeps his classified documents right where they belong. Inside a Journey record jacket from the 1980s. Gerard Gibert, SuperTalk, Mississippi.
I got rice cooking in the microwave. Got a 3-day beard I don't plan to shave, and it's a goofy thing, but I just gotta say, hey, I'm a-doing all right.
You don't cook rice in the microwave, do you, Rhino?
Not unless I'm in a real big hurry.
Okay. Well, that's usually when you use the microwave. We're pleased to welcome Clifton Carroll, Executive Director of the Skills Foundation. Clifton, good to see you.
Thank you for having me.
You bet. So, saw you last night. Hadn't really talked about that. The Harrison County Republican Club had an event where they recognized former Governor Haley Barbour for his leadership in the post-Katrina period. He was the governor at the time. He spoke well over an hour, and it's amazing that he can recall all that information and stand at the podium and speak. It's about a wide variety of aspects of that. And, I mean, he's a treasure in that he's got all that experience and all that perspective, and it's stored up in his head. So he was good enough to come address the group. I enjoyed that.
Yeah, that was great. Anytime you get to hear from Governor Barbour, it's always just a treat. But, yeah, I mean, you're exactly right. I mean, just, the amount of information and context that he has in his head, it really is fascinating. And I mean, being down on the coast and enjoying all the incredible stuff they have down there, and then looking at the pictures and hearing the stories of what it was, and when everybody woke up on August 30, 2005, and seeing the destruction, and his leadership and the leadership of others around Mississippi really have just turned it into an opportunity to build back better. And that's what we've seen.
Yeah, absolutely. And he pointed that out countless times. And what was really fascinating was hearing him talk about him being approached by people in other parts of the country, such as Barney Frank. I mean, I didn't know that. That was fascinating. I mean, there's probably very little policy that Haley Barbour and Barney Frank agree on, but he was very supportive of Mississippi, and Haley made the point, we realize we're all Americans and all this thing together in our serious time of need here in Mississippi. Certainly that was the most challenging time. That was fascinating hearing that.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, I think one of the best things that he said, was the line from his mom. Crises don't create character, they reveal it.
Yeah.
And that really revealed the character of Mississippi, and it was the type of character that the rest of the country could rally around, where you do see these people who are staunchly opposed to each other on policy, but who are coming together to support the people who have had their entire lives turned upside down.
Kudos to Harrison County Republican Club for organizing the event, having the former governor come in, and many of our statewide leaders as well. That was really a great event, great venue, and it's hard to believe it's been 20 years. But
It's crazy.
We could say we saw Mississippi in its finest hour, honestly. And that's the point that the governor made over and over and over again, was just the responsiveness, the resilience, and the community unity of Mississippians was on full display. And he made a good point of that. So,
Absolutely.
All right, tell the folks about the Skills Foundation, exactly what you guys do. Let's start with that.
Yeah, so, Skills Foundation, we're a nonprofit based in Jackson, and our mission is to increase Mississippi's skilled workforce. The mission was important when the foundation was started, and it's even more important now. When you look at the economic development success the state is having, the record economic development investments that we're seeing, thanks to Governor Reeves and Bill Cork and the team at MDA, we have so much opportunity, but we also have needs to get more people into the right jobs, the right careers that correspond with these high-paying opportunities that we have more and more across the state. And so, fields like construction, manufacturing, the energy sector, information technology, healthcare, we have so many great jobs in Mississippi that pay really well, that offer benefits, and really can give people a path to a lifetime of success. And, part of the problem is that a lot of people just don't know about them, or they don't know how to get to them. And so our entire mission is to help educate people and get people on the right track where they are able to go and obtain those good jobs, because that's good for them because they're making money. It's good for their communities because they're able to support their families and contribute to the local economy. And it's great for Mississippi because it means that we can continue to achieve, our economic potential, filling jobs, attracting more jobs, and it just benefits the whole system.
All right, so tell us about this signing bonus contest, so to speak, you guys got going on.
Yeah, so we were really excited about it this year. We started this a couple years ago, and thankfully it's basically doubled every year since. But basically, we want to celebrate and highlight the students who have decided to go into one of these routes that we're talking about. So, when a high school senior says, I'm going to go play football at Jackson State, or I'm going to go play football at Ole Miss, and they have their little sign-in deal, and it's fun. It's a celebration of that decision. We feel like the folks who are going into these high-demand, high-paying careers that have kind of this awareness issue, they deserve to be highlighted. They deserve to be celebrated. And so we'll pick a few schools. They'll tell us what they're going into, why they want to go into it, and we'll pick a few people and award them a signing bonus. And this money effectively goes to things like transportation, books, equipment, whatever somebody may need to really get started into their career or career training.
$1,000, right?
$1,000, that's right.
And you're giving out 29.
This year we gave out 29 across 7 schools to 29 students.
Okay.
And so, last year it was 15. Year before it was around 8.
Okay.
So we're excited. We hope to see this continue to grow, because we think it's a great way to really encourage more people to follow in the footsteps of the people we're highlighting.
Skills that pay. That's the name of the program.
That's
right?
exactly right.
Yeah, that's cool. What sort of reaction do you get from the students when they find out they've received this bonus?
It's excitement. It is sometimes met with a little skepticism. Hold up a second. This seems a little too good to be true.
Yeah, what strings are attached
what
here,
are the
right?
strings attached? But once they, really understand, like, hey, this is a real thing that we're trying to help y'all. We're trying to raise the profile of what y'all are doing. They really get excited, and even more rewarding for me is seeing the parents get so excited, their siblings, their friends, supporting them, helping to celebrate what they're doing. And so, as we've gone, through these, we continue to grow the ceremonies themselves as well. And it's just been a really awesome thing seeing, members of the community, members of the education community coming around and supporting all of these students who are making these decisions.
Yeah. What sort of skills are you guys focused on with respect to just enhancing, improving the overall skill sets of our people?
Right. So, I mean, we kind of focus on sectors, but within those, so like construction, for instance, like, HVAC, carpentry, welding, plumbing, like these are things that we know can pay really well, and we need a ton of them. I mean, we have massive construction operations going on across Mississippi, even excluding, the Amazon and the Compass data centers. I mean, but when you add those in, I mean, we're looking at, a need of 100,000 construction workers across the state.
Wow.
And then, another big one, diesel technology. On the other side, so for any industry to run, you got to have trucks and you got to have equipment.
Yeah.
And to have that, you got to have people to service them. And those are great jobs. I mean, a lot of them start out paying $70,000 a year or more.
Wow.
And so, that's another example.
Yeah.
And then, getting down to like utility linemen. I mean, those are great paying jobs. And I mean, in Mississippi, we are no stranger to storms. And, your power gets knocked out, the next day it's back on. It's because these guys are the ones doing it.
No doubt.
So, just kind of focusing on those key industry sectors in Mississippi that are kind of critical to our continued economic growth.
To what extent, Clifton, do you work with employers on making sure that you're aligning the skills and the training with their needs?
Yeah, so I mean, we try to stay in constant communication with employers. We try to get direction from employers because, I mean, at the end of the day, they're the ones who are hiring these people. They're the ones who have the needs that we're trying to meet. And so, it's critical to have those conversations and to have that dialogue. And one thing that I think has really kind of made that easier, improved it, the creation of Accelerate Mississippi and its continued success that it's had, just, basically, let's figure this all out, from one kind of perspective, and then let's all go out and execute on this mission.
Yeah.
And so being able to bring in, private partners is critical to that mission.
Well, companies that are looking to expand into the area or existing companies that are looking at making additional investments, maybe expanding product or service lines, they rely on a ample supply of skilled labor. And so this is a big asset the state has to help boost economic growth.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, we love to all talk about these new businesses coming in, and it is exciting. But the reality is we do have a lot of people who have set up shop here and have been here a while, and they want to continue to grow.
And that's absolutely right. $1,000 for those lucky high schoolers, 29 of them this year.
That's right.
Probably go up next year, right?
That's what we're hoping to. So
Great
we're
program.
excited.
Thanks, Clifton. Great program.
Thank you, Gerard.
Clifton Carroll, Executive Director of the Skills Foundation, has been our guest. We're coming right back after the break in the Element Wealth Studio.
From the SeabrookPaint.com.
SuperTalk Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. It's middays from the Element Wealth Studio. At 12:05, it's Professor Ron Rychlak from the Ole Miss Law School. He's also the Secretary-Treasurer of the SEC Executive Committee. He's going to share his thoughts on the NCAA NIL settlement and what that means for students and universities in the great state of Mississippi. That should be an interesting conversation. That's at 12:05 today. Let's see what we got on the C Spire text line. Let's see. Jerry in Pontotoc. Kamala Harris says she will find the root cause of the Los Angeles riots. Okay. Thank you there, Kamala. Whatever the heck that means. Unbelievable. Musk's actions.
That was meant more tongue-in-cheek.
Yeah, I know. Musk's actions are very typical for people with substance abuse issues. Yeah, he's, of course, the story probably by now that he's gone out and expressed his regret for some of the posts. He said it was a little harsh, too hard, etc. I don't know exactly what his language was, but he's semi-apologizing.
Without apologizing.
Yeah, that's what I would say. I mean, he'll just come out and say, I'm sorry, and apologize, and wish.
The memes from the whole thing were hilarious.
They were, man. Some of the AI-generated animated content.
The AI-generated video of Hillary Clinton with Elon duct taped up, and she's got his phone, and he's just sitting there wide-eyed as she's tweeting all this from his account. The kind of stuff that, sadly, some people on the interwebs think is real.
I know, and I've seen all kinds of crazy stuff. I'm sure you have too.
My new favorite is a fake news reporter. It's a whole series of them where she's out there like, I'm out here at so-and-so port, and oh my goodness, it's a UFO coming up out of the ocean, and I'm not real. Like, they make sure to put the I'm not real part of it in there because it does look photorealistic, and I'm sure some people would, oh my gosh, the aliens are invading.
Yeah, some of that stuff is just crazy. And there are people that unfortunately seem to accept it as fact. And that's, I guess, the risk of some of this AI-generated content, which is so deadgum realistic looking, but you got to just sort of think through it. And no, I mean, now I've seen one where the Trump and Musk are like eating McDonald's, and they portray them as just these blown up, overstuffed, overeating, massive people. Obviously, that is not real. But the way they're able to also dub over the speech is really pretty incredible. I mean,
yeah, that's more impressive than the AI video generation because while there are some that have figured out the right way, the right prompt to give the AI to generate it in a way that looks convincing,
the
vast majority of the vocal AI components out there that replicate the human voice, they seem to have had more cycles applied to them or more attention put to it.
It could be it's just easier.
It very well could be. Because it is the one you've got to go, okay, hang on. Is that their actual cadence or is it an imitation of their cadence? It's to the point where AI is good at doing like an impression. And you know how some people can do a really good impression to where if they're not right next to the original, you think, oh, yeah, they got that nailed.
Yeah, I thought it was pretty good. The one that I saw specifically, I shared with a couple of friends that I was talking about that shows them eating. Looks like that it portrays Trump eating Kentucky Fried Chicken. Let's see what Musk is eating here. And they're like on the phone. They're both holding their cell phones, having a conversation, and they both look just like disheveled slobs, you know. And okay, so Musk is eating cheeseburgers at McDonald's, and Trump is at the KFC, and they're talking on the telephone. They're going at each other. So, man, oh man, fascinating times we live in with the power of this AI. I'm sure you could just throw a few prompts out there and write, and it would generate this little animation. It's incredible how powerful that is. I saw this morning, actually heard a report that though, of course, corporations across the country and the world are embracing generative AI and requiring, in many cases, their employees to do so. Many have got customized GPTs, generators of content, that they're using, that have been trained in their business and so forth. Some companies that deal with confidential information, consumers, banks, for example, financial institutions. And the banks are claiming, like J.P. Morgan, super embraced AI, paid third parties to create their own sort of version of a typical GPT. which stands for Generative Pre-trained Transformer, by the way. I don't know who came up with that, but it just basically means I got all this information at my disposal. You just ask me a question, and I can give you some text or video or images. That's essentially what that means.
The naming of it is the age-old chicken or egg problem between engineers and marketing.
That's true.
Can the marketing people market what the engineers can build, and can the engineers build what the marketing people market?
Yeah, I agree. But here's the concern that's now come up, that the tools are screen scraping the content to more completely train and to add to the knowledge base, if you will, the large language models being queried by the GPTs to produce content. So as it generates content, the tool itself, and then, of course, the end user often may modify, edit that somewhat. It then scrapes that, extracts that, adds that to its LLM database for future chats, future prompts, future exercises, except that's getting into the public domain and oftentimes. And so now these companies are concerned about the security aspect of that. It's not nefarious. It's not that the tool itself is trying to breach and penetrate and compromise and extract data as much as it is, hey, we're just trying to make our tools better. So the more we generate, I mean, it's how it's training itself. That's the whole idea behind the deal, is it keeps doing more and more and more, and as it's doing that, it's getting trained. So
I'm trying to remember, was it the IT crowd that had the whole episode? Maybe it wasn't the IT crowd. There was some TV show, gosh, it's been a decade ago now, that they brought in a guy to use AI to help with their IT. And he developed the AI to fix all the problems.
Yeah.
And the AI deleted all of their code because the simplest solution to fixing the problems was to, well, you got to start over because this is crap.
Just 86 it, right? Yeah, so, I mean, that's an interesting dilemma I hadn't thought about, but that's the whole model behind these tools is the more it works, just like a human.
And that's why you have to have prompt engineers.
That's
and all
exactly
the other
right.
fancy titles with the word prompt in it, because you have to train it not to do that before you can release it on the people.
That's exactly right. And so in this case, hey, don't go
Silicon
screen
Valley,
scrape.
that was it.
Okay. Don't go screen scrape and gain this information and then go add it into the LLMs being used in the public domain. I mean, you can see where that would cause all kind of problems. Not necessarily just limited to breaching privacy and confidentiality of individuals or companies, but you can see how that could land in the hands of your competitors as well. Well, they would see what you're doing internally. I mean, imagine if a competitor had access to your screens and your systems that you're using to run your business, and all your customer and product information and everything else is proprietary and confidential. I mean, when you got these powerful tools like this, that ain't a big deal to extract that and then just go add it to the database, if you will, the models, which are gigantic, but other smart people that have a use for that in a nefarious way could obtain it, could gain it, extract it, use it against you, or release information to the public domain that's confidential about people.
And all while the free market is trying to figure this out, government would still be holding committees to have meetings for the research purpose of understanding what happened 10 years ago with all this technology, so they could regulate it way too slowly.
Yeah. And that's exactly what's happening. Of course, you know, we've got this task force the governor has sanctioned. I look forward to serving on that. We were supposed to have our first meeting the day after the budget special session. That's been postponed for a while, but we're coming right back in the Element Wealth studio.
For a limited time, get
SuperTalk Mississippi.
This is what we stand for.
We are back in the Element Wealth studio. Appreciate you joining us. So, look, these are the growing pains of any novel technology. Super powerful, massive productivity gains are being reported in selected industries. This report I saw this morning was specifically dealt with the banking industry, and it was Truist and Citibank and one more, J.P. Morgan, and talking about use cases. I mean, how they've implemented AI in their just standard, normal, everyday operational processing. And they're realizing tremendous gains from that. And then somehow they discovered the tools themselves, even though they all had custom versions of these tools built, tailored for their specific industry and then company, that the tools themselves were increasing their knowledge base by extracting information produced through the various prompts used by the bankers. So it's often they dealt with confidential customer information and other just confidential company data that you wouldn't disclose to the public square, but the tool doesn't know any better. It says, hey, I can get smarter, right, by grabbing some of this data and adding it to my repository for future use. That's what the thing's all about. So it's just something that we have to contend with. They didn't announce any plans to discontinue uses of the tools. They're not going to do that. They're just getting too much benefit and value out of it. But they just got another layer of security they're going to have to implement and other policies, procedures, systems to prevent this leakage is what they're going to have to do. And that's, I think, something they'll find.
They're going to have to actually dig into the black box.
That's exactly right. But that's doable.
Oh, yeah.
That's absolutely doable. It's costly. It's technically complicated, but smart people will figure that out. So this is an example how, if you think about it, how this advent of a new technology creates more opportunity, ancillary opportunity you never even thought about, honestly. Nobody probably thought about that. Well, clearly, because that's why it's in the news the last couple of days. They're finding out after using it, wait a second, we're seeing some of this land out in the public square. How the heck that happened? And that's exactly what's going on here. So this was a little different than an intentional breach with nefarious intent and some sort of malicious intent. That's not what this was. This was just the tool doing what it's been trained to do, which is get smarter, essentially. Mose says, first, the Walton Air is doing it because she wants open borders. Two, any protests in the Southeast will get a different response than Los Angeles if it turns into riots. I think that's true. I don't think the governor of Mississippi, Tate Reeves, will put up with any nonsense in downtown Jackson or wherever else these No Kings protests are scheduled. What's funny?
I'd be willing, well, no, I'm not going to say I'd be willing to bet, but I would presume that the No Kings protest held in Jackson, Mississippi this coming Saturday will see fewer than 24 people show up to protest.
I think that's probably right. I don't expect that to be a big deal.
You might get to 20. I don't know that you get over 24.
Well, what the heck are you achieving? I mean,
absolutely nothing except wasting 2 hours of your Saturday.
Exactly. So, I think on that basis alone, we'll see whatever protests occur somewhat a nothing burger.
It will likely be the same old, Order of the Silver Hair with their terribly made signs standing out in the heat.
Yeah. I think
about
right.
something.
Shaq Bully in Biloxi says, how about this? Like abortion term. I can't read it here. I think that was some serried spelling errors. Policing of illegal immigrants over to the states. Oh, turn policing. I got you. It said term. Those that want them out get huge federal subsidies. Those that want them to stay get nothing. Then let the state's voters decide. Honestly, Shaq Bully, that's really pretty much what the Medicaid reforms do in the One Big Beautiful Bill Act with respect to federal funding. So what you hear a lot out in the public, certainly from Republicans, say, hey, look, we're kicking all the illegals off Medicaid. That's not exactly what the bill does. Rather, it simply incorporates a provision that says, hey, look, states, if you are providing Medicaid coverage to illegals, we're going to reduce the federal match for the able-bodied adult coverage group from the present standard 90% covered by the federal government to 80%. But keep this in mind, illegals are not eligible for federal Medicaid, that illegals that are receiving Medicaid in the states that are doing that, there's a dozen or so of them, are being paid for, their coverage is being paid for by the states exclusively. Coming right back, we'll get into that in just a minute. Stay with us. BusinessJournal.com, Scott Coopwood, publisher and president.
And now, another hour of the talk that keeps Mississippi talking. Middays with Gerard Gibert.
Begin your transition now.
Now on SuperTalk, Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. It is Middays. We are live in the Element Wealth studio on this
Hump Day.
Thanks so much for joining us. So before we went to break there, and I didn't recognize that we were in the final segment of the first hour, this deal with Medicaid, it is sort of being portrayed that illegals are fully enrolled in the standard Medicaid program, where the federal government picks up its share of the cost of coverage, and the states pick up their share, and that ranges from 50% all the way up to 90%. 90% is the standard that the federal government pays for the able-bodied coverage group. That is also known as so-called Medicaid expansion. That was enacted in the Affordable Care Act 2010. Essentially, it extended Medicaid benefits, Medicaid coverage, to a new coverage group, that being able-bodied adults with a income of less than 138% of the federal poverty level. Prior to that, Medicaid was a safety net for children that lived in low-income homes, for pregnant women during the pregnancy and for some period thereafter. Again, all with having requiring to have low incomes. There are different income thresholds and income eligibility tests depending on the coverage group. And then the blind, the disabled, and low-income elderly. That was the standard Medicaid program since 1965. 2010, the able-bodied adult coverage group was added with incomes below 138% of the federal poverty level. That would be $21,000 a year. Illegals have never been eligible for Medicaid. I'm not saying that they don't slip through the cracks and get enrolled in the program where the federal government picks up a part of it, but Medicaid is administered, all the eligibility, all the enrollment at the state level by the state Medicaid agencies. In some states, such as California, they have funded Medicaid for illegals fully with state dollars. And that, of course, is consuming resources in our healthcare industry at a below par cost, if you will. Anytime somebody's getting reimbursed with Medicaid, for the most part, that reimbursement's below cost. So how do hospitals and medical providers, how do they make ends meet? They charge all of us stiffs who are paying that for that expensive commercial insurance. That's how they do it. So what the reform would do that's included in the One Big Beautiful Bill is it sends the message to the states that do allow illegals to participate in Medicaid, even though the states are fully funding those that coverage, those premiums. It basically says if you're doing that, we're going to cut the amount we're paying you for the legitimately enrolled citizens in the able-bodied coverage group, where we're paying federal government 90%. We're going to cut it to 80%. Well, that would be a huge loss of federal money to those states to continue that practice. And I couldn't find anything, Rhino, that says even if you just have one person, state of California, that's enrolled in Medicaid and you're paying for it fully, I don't see any distinction between one person, and a million people. It just says if you're still paying for Medicaid for illegals, we're going to reduce your FMAP. I don't know how they're going to police that, verify, determine that they're doing that. But the theory is the projection by the CBO and the Democrats are just having a field day with this. You're going to kick all these people off Medicaid. Well, yeah, because the states are paying for illegals to essentially crowd the system. Hey, come to America, right? It's what California's message is. I'm using them because they got the most, and they've been doing this for a long time. They call it Medi-Cal. That's their version of Medicaid, if you will. That includes, and even though, like I said, they're paying for it, they're not getting any federal funding assistance to pay for illegals on their Medicaid. Fact is, they're consuming resources. And that crowds out those who truly do need health care that are American citizens. That's the problem. And to a great extent, it's a lure. They come here for that. I know I can go to California and I can get on Medicaid, right? I mean, that's the problem is you're just inviting them to come here because you're providing benefits. It really is irrelevant the federal government may not be participating in that cost. The more important thing is you're exploding, if you will, you're boosting the number of illegals that come here because you're offering these benefits that are reserved for American citizens. Supposed to be a safety net. So essentially what the federal government says in this bill, the One Big Beautiful Bill, is we're going to punish you if you continue this practice by reducing our payments to you for the able-bodied adult coverage group from 90% of those costs of premiums per enrollee to 80%. Now, it's being reported that California and some other states may say, okay, we'll just take less money from the federal government. We're still going to have illegals on our Medicaid program, and we'll just pay for it. And then the other major provision that's designed to cut Medicaid costs at the federal level is this practice that is really sort of taken hold and spread across the country, which is we're going to charge hospitals a tax. They will pay in to the state's coffers that we will then use to fund Medicaid so that they can be enrolled in Medicaid, essentially covering the state's portion, the state's cost of Medicaid. They're passing that cost on to the providers, and they're the ones who benefit more than anybody else from Medicaid. They're getting paid, as opposed to someone showing up in their ER that doesn't have any insurance. And so those are the two major provisions of Medicaid. And then the third major provision is instituting work requirements for the able-bodied adult coverage group. And this is what the Democrats are just absolutely railing about and decrying the legislation is taking people out of their health care. They're all going to lose their health care coverage and going on and on and on. I mean, the hyperbole is outrageous. Hospitals are going to close and people are going to die in the streets because we're simply saying, you got to go to work to get Medicaid. And then the other provision that says, hey, states, if you're going to continue to pay for Medicaid for illegals, we're going to cut the amount that you get from the federal government. And if you're going to pass on your costs to providers with these taxes, which then gets paid for by us on commercial coverage. That's how that cycle works, if you think about it. It's a shell game with the dang money, which is all fungible. And so this is the federal government, I applaud this, attempting to rein in the craziness. I don't consider those, Rhino, to be cuts to Medicaid. Those are just practical, reasonable reforms. But the Democrats, these are major cuts to Medicaid. People are going to die in the street. It's just a lie. I know you're shocked that they're lying about
If
this.
their mouth is moving, ...
But I just want you guys to know that's the truth. What I just told you is the truth about the reforms in the bill to Medicaid. Now, I would submit they don't go far enough, honestly. So, because the problem with a work requirement is if you're a student, if you're engaged in community service, if you're a caretaker, and in doing some research on this, it looks like about 80% of the people in the able-bodied coverage group satisfy the work requirement right now. So I don't think we're going to see this major change in that. And here's the other thing, is if they go to work and they're eligible for Medicaid, and I know a lot of people say, well, we shouldn't even cover those people. I get it. They're able-bodied adults. We want them working. And I've heard Republicans say this. We want them working so they can get off Medicaid. Okay, so if they go to work, but if it's with an employer or a small business, vast majority of those, under 50 employees, don't provide health care coverage. It's expensive, and they don't provide it. So what that means, I'll get into that on the other side of the break. At the end of the day, keep this in mind. When I come back, I'll explain it. We're just shifting it out of one welfare bucket to another welfare bucket, really not changing overall cost to the government. I'll explain on the other side.
You don't want to see me cry. Oh, baby, please. It isn't fair. You don't want me to cry no more.
The talk that keeps Mississippi talking.
We're rolling. Hit it. Go. Play it.
Middays with Gerard Gibert on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Shake, 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 Sinora, shake your body line. Shake, 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 Sinora, shake it all the time. Work, 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 Sinora, work your body line. Work, 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 Sinora, work it all the time.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Middays from the Element Wealth Studio. I hope I'm not boring you with this stuff, but it's important to understand because, and I get it, these politicians, well, I don't with respect to the Democrats because their stuff's just lying hyperbole, honestly. This pushing grandma off the cliff and people dying in the streets. How long have we been hearing that from them? Have you seen that happen yet? No. Are you aware of any medical doctor or medical professional who would refuse to provide medical treatment to any human? You ever seen that before?
Only in examples of repeat offenders of people coming in simply trying to get pain pills.
And I would argue that's not even medical treatment there. That's just scamming the dang system for their own personal little highs there.
I mean, some of them have resorted to such measures as pulling out their own teeth.
Unbelievable. Well, I don't like the fact that it's that way, but see, these people, you worked around a lot of them. I just happen to be social friends with them. They're just not designed that way. I mean, their instinct is to help people, right? That's what they do, the Hippocratic Oath and all that stuff. And just throw that out the window. They're just, generally speaking, if you're going to go into that line of work, you're just wired that way. And, you know, they get great satisfaction out of treating people, curing people. Big time. That's why they do it. That's why so many of them do it for a long time, honestly.
And some of them are so emotionally attached to their job that they have to walk away from it because of the stress, because you're dealing in some situations with life and death.
No doubt about it. The stress and the ability to separate that and leave it at the office, so to speak, I don't know how they do it. You got to be a special person. And anyone that deals with challenging human situations like that. I worry about our folks at Child Protection Services. My daughter works there now, and sometimes she'll share some of the stuff. I mean, it just absolutely breaks your heart. You just can't believe this kind of stuff happens in this country, in this society, in this state. And they're responsible for dealing with those issues. But on the Republican side, so that's the Democrats are full of all this hyperbole. It's just wrong. You're kicking people off their Medicaid. They're going to die on the streets and all that kind of stuff. It's just completely false. Republicans, on the other hand, it's not exactly 100% accurate to say we're kicking all the illegals off Medicaid, because the figure you've typically seen cited is 1.4 million. And that may be the case, but just know that they're not presently enrolled in Medicaid, talking about illegals receiving federal funding. Are mistakes made? Absolutely. Or do we have illegals, probably right here in the state of Mississippi, that were thought to be, at least by the folks involved in the enrollment, in the verification and approval process, to be fully legal? But crazy stuff happens. People are smart. They figure out ways to subvert all the controls and all the eligibility tests. I know you're shocked. That sort of stuff happens. And that's the biggest problem we have in all these programs, honestly, is that people have made an industry, honestly, out of defrauding them. And that is a problem that hopefully we're addressing now with the Doge folks calling attention to that.
Well, I mean, look at something as simple as Uber and Uber Eats and DoorDash and the like, rideshare services and delivery services.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say there are countless examples, but there are way too many examples of a legal immigrant with family who are here illegally signing up for the rideshare service and then basically selling their credentials to their illegal family members to participate in the rideshare illegally under the credentials of the legal immigrant for a cut of whatever they're making.
Yep.
And if they're willing to defraud something like that, what makes you think they're not willing to defraud healthcare?
No, and you know it's happening every day. And so back to this Medicaid thing, because this is what all the wailing and gnashing of teeth and clutching of pearls from the Democrats is coming from. That's probably their biggest complaint and criticism of the One Big Beautiful Bill are the Medicaid reforms. They believe that's politically expedient for them. Anytime you start talking about health care, it's thought to sort of stoke emotions. Oh, my gosh, grandma's dying in the street.
Well, now House Democrats are trying to invoke the Byrd rule over the inclusion of striking the tax on suppressors for firearms. Something like 60-some-odd Democrats signed on to a letter saying you can't do that because of the Byrd rule.
And that's another provision of the bill. It's federal tax on suppressors. I didn't even know that existed until I started digging into that when I heard about that there was like this special tax at the federal level. That's just, you don't see too much stuff that has like a special tax on consumption at the federal level. Excise taxes on fuel, There's a tires. I think there's a federal excise tax, if I'm not mistaken. But back to the Medicaid thing, really three major reforms. First is you got to go to work if you're in the able-bodied adult coverage group. Second is, hey, states, if you're still paying for coverage for illegals, we're going to penalize you for that by reducing the FMAP. By the way, there are 14 states that are doing that. And then the third one are these provider taxes is what they call. It's very common practice across many states, including here in the state of Mississippi, where, hey, providers, you're going to pay us some money, and we're going to take that in exchange for that, we're going to use that to cover our cost of Medicaid. In fact, many states would not have expanded Medicaid and added the able-bodied coverage group were it not for the fact that they were able to strike an agreement with the providers that say, hey, guys, if you'll help pick up some of the cost of the state, we'll get all the federal dollars. You see why we're $36 trillion in debt now? So those are the three major reforms. But here's the thing about the work requirements. If you go to work in a small employer, it's likely, as I said before we went to break, that the insurance coverage isn't available. And even if it is, if you were eligible for Medicaid because you make less than $20,000 a year, you probably can't afford $10,000 a year for health care insurance. So what would happen is you would go to the exchanges, the Obamacare exchanges, and get subsidized coverage, which would be limited because the enhanced subsidies expire at the end of this year. They were passed in the Joe Biden Inflation Reduction Act. So in this big, beautiful bill, the Republicans are allowing the enhanced subsidies to expire, which means instead of your coverage when your income is below 150% of the federal poverty level being zero, it's going to be 2%. 2% of your income. So if you make $20,000 a year, your coverage for insurance you purchase in the exchange would be $400 a year. So you go from being on Medicaid at zero to $400 a year by buying coverage in the exchange. And then there's what are called cost-sharing reductions that also offset the cost of deductibles and copays. The One Big Beautiful Bill does reduce that those cost-sharing reductions a little bit. All I'm really saying here, trying to point out, is what we may end up doing in reality is shifting out of one welfare program, that's Medicaid, to another one, and that's the subsidized commercial coverage in the Obamacare exchanges. By the way, last year, the cost of that, the subsidies, $130 billion. And you're not hearing anybody talk about that. All the focus is on Medicaid. It's $130 billion. The Medicaid cuts are estimated to be $80 billion a year. The subsidies in the Obamacare exchanges last year cost the taxpayers $130 billion. And then there's some reforms in SNAP, and there's some reports literally hot off the press. Senators now are clashing on the One Big Beautiful Bill over some of those reforms. Their concerns are that these reforms in Medicaid and reforms in the SNAP program, which would put more of the cost burden on the states, including here in the state of Mississippi, they're concerned about how this may blow a hole in state budgets. It would cause problems here in the state of Mississippi if we had to pay more to fulfill the state's share of SNAP. That'd be a problem as well for the state of Mississippi that I think we're going to have to at least be cognizant of where that puts us and maybe do some forecasting and modeling of that. You can see, however, that the states are benefiting from the federal largesse, which is just borrowing money to make the states whole. Coming right back in the Element Well studio.
From the SeabrookPaint.com.
Okay, is everybody ready?
I'm ready. Ready here.
Middays with Gerard Gibert on SuperTalk, Mississippi.
The Diablo Motors had a hell of a sale downtown yesterday. Word got around, no money down, take years and years to pay. got there, the lot was bare, but the salesman said, hold on. For a little cash, I got a two-tone ash out behind my barn. If the devil dance.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Middays. On the C-Spire text line, just being disabled doesn't qualify you to receive Medicaid. If your monthly income is over the set amount, you will not qualify to get Medicaid even if you are disabled. Right, I said that. Rhino, you heard me say that. It was subject to income eligibility tests. Agree. However, you're automatically qualified if you qualify for Social Security disability. You apply, and that's generally what happens. Most people apply for Social Security disability benefits, known as SSDI. Once you're in that system and you're marked as receiving SSDI benefits, you go apply to Medicaid, you're in. That's the way it works. The income threshold, based on latest data I'm looking at, is quite low. You have an asset limit of $2,000, which isn't a lot, and an income limit of $967 a month. That's for the blind and disabled, regular Medicaid. If you're in a nursing home, institutionalized, the income limit $2,901, almost $3,000 a month. So I think that's about 250% of the federal poverty level. So, and then if you're a couple, it treats it a little different. So, I mean, that's the original purpose of the program. It was designed for those coverage groups, and it's perverse in that when Obamacare was passed, the law said, hey, look, states, if you'll add low-income, able-bodied adults to your coverage, we'll pay 90% of it. Started out as 100, and it was decremented over 5 years to 90%. And that's where it stands now, 90%, as an incentive to get those states to expand Medicaid. Mississippi has not done that, as you know. There are 10 states that have not, because the state would have to pick up the other 10%. There was a lot of talk that the Republicans in the Congress were going to reduce the 90%, because this is what doesn't make any sense. For the able-bodied adults, the federal government picks up 90%, but for the standard original coverage groups thought to be in the safety net status, children in low-income homes, pregnant women, blind, disabled, low-income elderly, the federal match is based on the per capita income of the state. Mississippi, with the lowest per capita income, receives roughly 78% of the cost of coverage in federal funding. The minimum is 50%, so the richer states, a couple of them are around the 50, I think Massachusetts, for example. Mississippi is 78%, but all states, regardless of per capita income, get 90% from the federal government for the able-bodied adult coverage group. It's upside down. So you've heard Republicans say this, and they're right. They're saying, look, this doesn't make sense. The federal government's paying 90% for the people who can work, and we're paying significantly less than that for those who are blind, disabled, indigent, elderly, children in low-income homes. The original rationale for the Medicaid program. And it's upside down. I agree. It is. The other thing to keep in mind is all this money that goes out to the states. When I read some of the comments from the senators who are pushing back, Senator Josh Hawley, for example, he says, on Medicaid, I don't want to see rural hospitals close, and I don't want to see any benefits cut in my state. I'm fine with work requirements. The provider tax is something that is a concern because of the rural hospitals. Senator Tommy Tuberville, he also weighed in on this issue. He's running for governor in Alabama in 26. Listen to this. He's warning against a provision in the House-passed bill that would make states pay at least 5% of the bill for food aid to low-income families. This was the SNAP reforms we were talking about There's some shifting of costs from the federal government to the state. So think about this, folks. The senator saying, wow, we can't shift those costs to the states. The federal government's got to continue to bear that to keep the states whole. In fact, he says, quote, don't bankrupt us. That's what the senator from Alabama, Tommy Tuberville, asked of his fellow Senate Republicans, referring to his state. So think about this, and this is what's gotten upside down in this country. Don't bankrupt the states, federal government. Keep sending that money. You mean the money we're borrowing? That's just upside down. That's perverted. That's messed up. The only reason, Senator Tuberville, your state and all the other states are able to make ends meet is because of the money we get from the federal government, because they got an unlimited supply of it. They just keep printing it, adding it to the tab. That's why we're $36 trillion in debt and rising. No talk about, no discussion about, hey, maybe we need to figure out a way to get these deficits and debt under control. No, federal government, you'd bankrupt my state. What the heck do you think you're doing, the federal government? I'm not suggesting that all the deficits of debt are bankrupting the federal government, because we fortunately have assets worth a whole lot more, but it is a problem that ain't going away, and especially with the attitude that you guys got to keep sending that money downstream. And all the states have gotten accustomed to the federal largesse, because the federal government doesn't even consider, hey, do we have that money? Oh, yeah, sure. We just fire up some more dollars on the press down there at the Treasury and send it downstream. When do we ever have a serious discussion about, guys, we ain't got it? It's just not happening. And it's hard for me to believe that they can be satisfied with this. Look, I'm for it. I want the bill to pass because the tax cuts are critical. And the most important aspect to me of this whole bill is the fact that the standard Tax Cuts and Jobs Act individual tax provisions will be made permanent. We don't have this exercise that we're undertaking right now, that in a few years they expire. Now we got Democrats in charge, and we can't get the things extended. In fact, they would raise taxes if they could. And I should also point out that some of the popular provisions, they do term out. The exemption for tips, for overtime, the immediate expensing, which I think is probably the provision that will cause more economic growth and investment in this country than any of the other provisions. Well, that thing has a life on it. It expires at the end of 28, because you can't make the math work to pass with 60 votes in the Senate, or less than 60 votes in the Senate. You're not going to get 60 votes because no Democrats are going to support this thing. So just keep in mind that these things that people are really looking forward to, tips, overtime, the additional deduction for seniors, standard deduction, $4,000, the exemption from Social Security didn't make the cut, but additional $4,000 standard deduction to seniors did. All that stuff expires in 4 years. Medicaid work requirements, by the way, that's not permanent. And they don't even kick in until the end of 26. There are some senators that want to pull that forward to January 1, 26. But this whole notion that, wow, we can't put that burden on the states, that's crazy, because you're borrowing money, federal government, to prevent that from happening. Man, oh man. Sounds like it's a good thing Mississippi didn't expand Medicaid, huh, says Darren in Jackson. It's possible from the perspective that this moratorium on provider fees, which is one way the state intended to at least offset some of its 10% costs, which are estimated to be in the $150 million range. Yeah, some chunk of that was going to be covered by the additional provider taxes that they agreed to, by the way, in the state. I'm just making the point that the work requirement, if these folks went to work and they didn't qualify for Medicaid because of their income, and they're not going to get, likely if they go to work, not going to get coverage from their employer. If it's a small business, they're probably not providing health care coverage benefits. They would be eligible to purchase coverage in the exchanges, which is more welfare. So I don't know if the CBO took that into account. You're just taking it out of this welfare bucket, the Medicaid welfare bucket, and putting it into the subsidized coverage welfare bucket. Either way, it's money the federal government's paying for somebody's health care. And you could say taxpayers are, but you're only picking up half of it because we're borrowing the other half. And everybody has a piece of that. We're coming right back with far under bumping us out of this segment. In the Element Wealth studio, it's Professor Ron Rychlak at 12:05.
Poly up of Mississippi.
It's so awesome!
Middays with Gerard Gibert.
Come on, let's get on with the show!
On SuperTalk, Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Middays. Once again in the Element Wealth studio. The C Spire text line, 601-879-4395 on the C Spire text line from the 662. Is in healthcare marketplace an expansion of Medicaid, also a part of Obamacare. Yeah, and in fact, the exchanges, the marketplaces, are really commonly referred to as Obamacare. They're just commercial coverage, standard commercial coverage that is sold in these marketplaces. The concept itself is not a bad idea. Now, this only applies, by the way, to the individual market. Now, what I mean by that is most Americans get their coverage, their health insurance, from their employer. In fact, of all the commercial coverage, about 85% of those with commercial coverage get it from their employer. The other 15%, it's now up to about 24 million people, they're self-employed, for example, or they work, as I said earlier, for an employer that just doesn't offer coverage. They're not required to. Only when you have more than 50 employees does the government require you to offer coverage. So if you're an employer of less than 50 employees, most don't. Would be unaffordable. Most larger employers, as a benefit, they will cover some cost of the premiums, at least for the employee. So the idea was for all those people who are self-employed or work for employers that don't offer coverage, the idea in the original Affordable Care Act is we're going to create these marketplaces, these exchanges. Each state would run their own, and insurers would offer their plans. And based on your income, you would qualify for federal subsidies up to 400%, about $100,000 for an individual of the federal poverty level. The federal government's going to pay some part of those premiums, and it's the calculations is based on your cost of premiums, the individual's cost of premiums, not exceeding a specified percentage of their household income. Right now, up to 150%, which is about $22,000, $23,000 for an individual, your cost is nothing, zero. Federal government, taxpayers are picking that up. Maybe I'm a little libertarian, but can we get rid of federal insurance that everybody pay for their own and I don't have to pay for it through taxes? So that would mean getting rid of Medicare and Medicaid and TRICARE. No, that's not going to happen. You got 77 million on Medicaid, 47 million last I checked on Medicare, and several million on TRICARE. No. In fact, the federal government accounts federal sponsored health care coverage accounts for about 70% of all the reimbursements to providers in the state of Mississippi between Medicaid, Medicare, and TRICARE. So it's easy to just say that. I know a lot of libertarians think that. So what would you tell, Rhino, the people who paid into Medicare all their life that are currently on Medicare? And by the way, have you ever met anybody that said, I hate my Medicare? No, they love it because it's either free or cheap, depending on which sort of route you went in your Medicare coverage. You can get third party, so-called Medicare Advantage. You know about those, or private insurers that you pay to cover all the stuff Medicare doesn't pay, in one big tidy package, if you will.
One of the main complaints I ever heard about Medicare was for Part D drug coverage with the donut hole in coverage.
Yeah, and that just means
where you had coverage for a bit,
and then none,
and you had to pay out of pocket for a bit, and then after that, pretty much everything was covered.
Yeah, and that's right. The so-called donut. Now, Part D, the Democrats and Republicans too often pointed that as a big mistake on the part of the Bush administration, because they did it without any income coming in. It's kind of like the 13th check and all the reforms that were made back in the 90s in Mississippi PERS. Here's more benefits. Well, wait, nobody paid any more in. There's no more money coming in. Don't worry about that. The markets are going to stay just like they are during the dot-com boom, right? We can count on that. How'd that work out? Right. Exactly. So, you know what I think the best thing we could do for Social Security and Medicare is loosen the restrictions on what the trust funds, the money can be invested in. Because right now that's limited. And, I think it's possible for us to reform that, to allow Social Security at a minimum to take on the same model, adopt the same model that Mississippi PERS and other state retirement systems do. Let them invest in assets other than just these 3% federal treasury bonds. Let them invest in equities and corporate bonds and other securities, managed by somebody that knows what they're doing, just like we rely on in PERS and other state methods. I think that would go a long way towards solving the insolvency. Fox News, SuperTalk News, then Professor Rychlak. Stay with us.
And now, the talk that keeps Mississippi talking.
That's what I like to listen to.
You're listening to Middays with Gerard Gibert here on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Winter is here again, oh Lord. Haven't been home in a year or more. I hope she holds on.
Welcome back, everyone. It's hour 3, the afternoon portion of Middays, now live from the Element Wealth studio on this
Hump Day.
It's our pleasure to welcome now Professor Ron Rychlak, Distinguished Professor of Law, and Jamie L. Whitten, Chair of Law and Government. He's also the Faculty Athletics Representative at Ole Miss and is Secretary-Treasurer of the SEC Executive Committee. Good morning or afternoon there, Professor Rychlak. Good to see you, sir. Did we get all that right?
Good morning, Gerard. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Make sure I got all that right. Is that all current? Are you still Secretary-Treasurer?
There's been a change.
Okay.
2 weeks ago, there was a rollover, and Chancellor Boyce is now president of the SEC Executive Committee, but there's only 7 members, and you can only have one from each institution. So after about 11 years, I've rolled off of the SEC Executive Committee just 2 weeks ago.
Okay. All right. Well, appreciate you updating on this. But I know you're been heavily involved in a lot of the activities and certainly in college athletics and more specifically SEC athletics in your role with the Executive Committee. But there's no doubt, Professor, that this advent of NIL has turned upside down college athletics, to say the least. I mean, that's putting it mildly. But now we have an NCAA NIL settlement, a lawsuit, that has a number of key provisions in it that is going to, I guess, perhaps create even more chaos, at least for a while, in the system. What are your thoughts?
Well, it's going to take a little while for the compliance people to adjust and go from the process of keeping money away from the athletes to bring them together and looking at the new rules and such. But hopefully this will provide some stability, at least for a while, and try to maintain competitive equity and fairness for the players and financial stability for the programs. Hopefully, because of the agreement that was worked out between the NCAA, the conferences, and the plaintiffs, this will provide some moment of peace.
Well, it's been the Wild West, it seems like, for a while, right? I mean, there really been almost no significant guidelines or rules or policies. The sky was the limit.
Well, the thing is that the state legislatures got into the act. They began with the process. They felt they were defending the rights of the student athletes. They began passing laws, some of which were in direct conflict with NCAA regulation. Well, the NCAA is a club, basically, and if the clubs are against the law, the club changes the rules to follow the law, and that's what they did, and it really opened up all kinds of you can call it problems or opportunities, but certainly a lot of different things were different once the laws began coming into effect. Yeah, incredible. So let's do us a rundown here. There are now some caps put in place, right? Talk about that. There are. Well, some of the changes that came into place. So this lawsuit, the House versus NCAA lawsuit, filed by a swimmer, Grant House, seeking a share of revenue for student athletes. Now, the revenue, it was agreed to that schools would be able to spend going forward up to $20.5 million per year of revenue share with existing athletes. As this is weighed across the different programs and such, there are a lot of issues there, whether is revenue share to be shared with sports that don't bring in revenue? And I think the consensus evolving is that no, those programs will not really significantly participate in revenue share. Football, men's basketball, some schools have baseball or women's basketball as revenue sports. They will be participating more significantly. But from the program's perspective, you think of Ole Miss or Mississippi State or Southern, any of the schools around that are going to get into this, they've got to figure out how to come up, if they want to be competitive, and in the SEC, it's going to require this. In the SEC, so certainly for State and Ole Miss, they're going to have to spend $20.5 million of revenue share with their athletes. And that means they have to find that money either with cuts or with additional revenue coming in, additional revenue streams, just to maintain competitive balance across the conference. So just to explain that maybe a little further, Professor, right now all that money goes into the kitty essentially, and they run the athletic departments with that. But if that's going to be taken off the top and distributed out to players, that's $20.5 million less you got to operate the athletic department. Is that essentially right? Yeah, you're running stadiums, you got employees, you got coaches, you got staffs, you got travel budgets, you got all that kind of stuff. And you got that not just in football. You might be, people tend to think about football down here, but for all of your programs, that's a lot of money to come out of a budget that, let's say for the SEC, standard budgets might be 130 to 200 million total. And I think for State and Ole Miss, you're talking about 140, 150, whatever. That's more than 10% of their budget will suddenly be going to a new expense category, and they have to figure out how they cover that. I mean, you're effectively adding a bunch of new employees without any additional sales and revenues, what you're doing here. It's kind of what they're doing, but I will point out that we're trying. The NCAA is not acknowledging employee status. This is revenue share. Okay. Not.
Okay. All right. Understand.
So clear about that.
Okay. I understand. I'm just thinking from a business perspective.
Sure. Of course.
I'm essentially increasing my payroll, if you will, whether or not they're employees. Certainly, it's just $20 million more of expenses that I didn't have before, and I got no additional revenue coming in from them. They're basically compelling through this, to this ruling that the schools will have to share. It's essentially what it is. Why they call it revenue sharing.
This is actually a settlement, because had this gone to trial, they were looking at a violation of antitrust law, and that leads to triple damages.
Okay.
And so there was concern that it would have bankrupted both the NCAA and the conferences. So this is not imposed by a court as much as it's agreed to by the parties, and the court approved it.
So what do you think, Professor, that this ruling in this case, how might this affect outside of just this revenue sharing requirement that you got to just cough up $20 million to the athletes? What else is going to happen out of this? I'm thinking about some programs may just shut down.
Well, recognize schools don't have to spend that $20.5 million. The Ivy League, for instance, just opted out of that part of the settlement.
Okay.
Now, I haven't talked about back damages.
Okay.
Paying athletes going back 10 years, primarily by the NCAA handling that.
Okay.
But you can opt out, or you can play for part. You can say we're gonna share $8 million with our athletes.
Okay.
But we can't really afford 20.5.
Oh, okay. I got you. So they got some latitude there. So I read something about even affecting regulation of NIL when you've got private companies perhaps that are funding, sponsoring an athlete, that there's some test they have to apply to make sure it's reasonable that Deloitte & Touche has been hired to do this. Is this right?
That's exactly correct. So what we've been talking about so far, you and I here, is revenue share.
Yeah.
There's still the name, image, and likeness category, which comes on top of revenue share.
Yeah.
And the new thing that this and kind of fits into where I said we're not going to be calling them employees, that is revenue share, because the NIL money, which will come on top of that, they're going to have to justify any amount above $600 is going to go through an outside audit to make sure it really is about name, image, and likeness, and not paying players for playing.
Okay. My gosh. What a mess that's going to be, because it's so subjective. I mean, unless they've got some sort of concrete algorithms and formulas they use, and I did see there's some of that in there, but it's still going to be subject to some opinion, I guess.
Well, it is. They have 12 factors and go through them, but it's probably not worth it. But the thing is, you're trying to, in essence, say, is this a fair market value for something where, at least currently, we don't have a market, and try and assess what would this really be worth in the real world. And there aren't that many pro athletes who have significant deals the way that a lot of college athletes do already.
We got a break. If you can hang on, I want to share with you a few more questions I have about this, just some theories I have, and get your take on it. Can you hang with us?
Happy to.
Okay, well, great. We got Professor Ron Rychlak from the Ole Miss Law School, former member now of the SEC Executive Committee. We're coming right back in the Element Wealth studio.
We've sent that Rip Van Winkle guy to the...
Check it out. Let's do this.
The talk that keeps Mississippi talking. Middays with Gerard Gibert.
Let's get on with it.
On SuperTalk Mississippi.
Let my
Welcome back, everyone. We are in the Element Well studio. We're visiting with Professor Ron Rychlak, talking about this NIL settlement. So, Professor, I know that a minute ago I sort of equated the situation, the revenue sharing, to having a bunch of new employees. I've often wondered, Professor, just run this by you, and I've had this thought for years, long before we had NIL and all this stuff, other stuff that's going on, that's turning college athletics upside down. Are we headed for a period where universities, colleges will essentially outsource, maybe franchise their athletic operations to third-party private organizations, and just they're out of the athletics business, receive royalties from the private companies, the experience, everything looks the same. The players are, in fact, employees of the third party, not even required to be students in school?
Well, I think issues down that avenue have been talked about. I believe Kentucky's looked at it maybe harder than some other schools. I don't know that anyone's ever talked about them not being students, and I think that would be potentially a make or break level. I was actually talking to somebody yesterday who said at that point they're minor league teams instead of school teams, and this guy I was talking to said, and I wouldn't care about them anymore.
Okay.
There is something about the being part of the school and part of the rah-rah. And the reason we have them is to build interest around the school. You know, in really no other nation has big-time sports associated with their universities the way they do in the United States. You wouldn't find this in Europe. And so it's a particularly unique situation. And I think those of us who work in and around it think it's worth preserving and trying to maintain the student-athlete ideal.
Yeah. Well, and I'm not saying I support it. I've just often thought as well, just my thoughts about higher education in general, that things are getting so specialized from an educational perspective. You experience this all the time, that you may want to pursue a particular course of study in a curricula. The university can't afford to have professors that can teach this wide range of subject matter, but you can have one, and maybe you could deliver that to 200 students across the world electronically. And so maybe it diminishes the brick and mortar aspect of higher ed.
Well, you're absolutely right. I will tell you, I mean, the corner of the law school where I work is basically the home for the one of the two centers in the world that really focuses on space law, the law that applies to matters in outer space. And they do more remote distance. Yeah. You know, they have got students around the world. And there are things and times that works with, and it works well with that National Remote Sensing Space Law Center that we have.
Okay.
I'm not sure that works well with football or baseball or basketball. You know, I mean, those are inherently team constructs built upon a locality and originally developed and designed kind of to attract the interest of young men to come to college and continue playing the games they love and get an education alongside of it.
Oh, I completely agree, and I didn't mean to conflate those two. I was just thinking about the disruptions that are occurring in higher ed in general, and how that might also figure into athletics somehow. That you know, just the right, the schools themselves, and the basis for all of it is the education aspect of it.
Yeah, no, I think it could. Obviously, there's interesting times in higher education. We've got all kinds of issues. Whether you like what's happening or not, now or whatever. There have been political issues that are around now, and they're influencing responses from governments. And I think it's necessarily always going to be a little bit that way, because universities are hotbeds of intellectual development. And we're going to have the people who have different ideas and want to argue and stress their points. And hopefully sports can be a chance for us to get away from those divisions and unify around something. Yeah. But it's been very controversial for a decade or so itself now. So maybe we can settle down, not just in athletics, but on campuses across the nation.
Yeah, and we've enjoyed a strong enrollment in the universities in Mississippi, particularly at Ole Miss and Mississippi State, USM, et cetera. But across the country, we've seen a decline in enrollment. And I've often thought that perhaps, Professor, and this is kind of off the subject of sports, but employers aren't as much concerned about the traditional linear degree as they once were. It may not be so much applicable in law, for example, but there are a lot of jobs that, I just need you to have these skills. I really don't care if you necessarily have a degree. You're seeing a lot of employers sort of change their policies in law in that respect.
Well, I think you've seen some universities change too, where we're offering some certificate programs.
Yeah,
I actually teach in one for athletics administration where you might be working your way up and you don't have your college degree, but you can take 2 classes and it'll really help you in your career. So universities are responding to that, I believe.
Okay. Well, I believe that's the case as well. I mean, it's maybe a situation where you either respond to those realities or you might not persist, right? You might not sustain, and that's the way the market works. I just find
I will.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I will say here at Ole Miss we've been doing very well with enrollment.
No doubt.
The school's been growing. There's some of us who've seen the campus grow and the city grow, the town grows so dramatically. You're starting to think it wouldn't be bad to maybe have hold tight for a month or so. But it's great and love having students. I'm always encouraging students to come take a look at Ole Miss and when they do, they usually want to come here.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say that to some extent, Ole Miss's success with the increased enrollment is at the expense of other institutions that are losing out on some of these students that are opting, especially with the big out-of-state enrollment.
Well, it is. And, it's really tough for a lot of private institutions to survive in some of these scenarios. And where schools like Ole Miss are trying to put a small liberal arts college within the university itself with our honors college and things like that.
Yeah. Well, how are things going at the law school in general?
Law school is doing well. We're bumping along. We've got a program in Cambridge. One of my colleagues, who's very involved in sports law, Will Berry, is teaching over there this summer, and we're looking at a really good enrollment. I've got a very good friend's daughter who's a very good student who 3 years ago would have been easily admitted, and we've got so many really outstanding applicants this year that she's on a wait list. And I'd love it if she got in, but we'll have to see what happens.
Yeah, I mean that is unusual to have a wait list, and so now I guess you've got a selection process to determine who makes it, right?
So we're drafting just like the coaches are drafting for their teams, I guess.
That's just amazing. But certainly things have changed. I think changed for the better. But this whole athletics world has just been totally upended. And you hear the fans that they're all over the map as far as their like or dislike for what's going on. I'm sure you've encountered that. When it's working and it's producing wins, they like it. But on the other hand, if it's not, we're paying all this money, we're not getting our money's worth. You know how that works. So you've got to
got that. Yeah. And we've got people with collectives and with sports betting and everything else who have particular investments who are really devoted to the team or to the victories anyway. And we had a really good year across the board in sports this year, by the way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know you, I'm always privileged to come up and speak to your gaming law class. I'm just curious, Professor, where do those students, or do any of them stay in the gaming industry that take that class? We got about a minute left.
Yeah, no, it was really interesting. Just yesterday, I had some folks from Nashville contact me about a case, and I said, well, we really need to talk to folks in the gaming commission. And so I pulled out my chart and looked around. A high number of my former students work for gaming commissions or work in law firms.
Oh, wow.
I spoke to one the law firm. It's a significant, highly regulated industry that's very important in this part of the nation.
No doubt.
It's fun to watch them develop and grow.
Specialized practice for sure. Professor, always good talking to you, sir. Really enjoyed it. Thanks for coming on, and enjoy your insight and your perspective. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Gerard. Look forward to having you up to class again this year.
Yes, sir. Folks, we're stepping aside for a break. Coming right back. Half an hour of Middays remains.
From the SeabrookPaint.com.
Okay, is everybody ready?
I'm ready. Ready here.
Middays with Gerard Gibert on SuperTalk, Mississippi.
Aruba, Jamaica, ooh, I wanna take you. Bermuda, Bahama, come on, pretty mama. Key Largo, Montego, baby, why don't we go? Jamaica, off the Florida Keys. There's a place called Kokomo. That's where you wanna go to get away from it all.
Well, folks, that, of course, from, what was the name of the movie? Can't believe it's, shoot. Tom Cruise, was he in that one, I think?
Cocktail?
Was that it? I think you're right.
I know it was in one of the Muppets movies.
No, I'm pretty sure it was, I was going to say it's related to a bar.
That'd be Cocktail.
Yeah, I think that's it. Was that Tom Cruise? Was he in that? Yeah, that's it. So, Rhino played that because we just learned a little while ago that one of the founding members of the Beach Boys, that song, of course, Kokomo, recorded by the Beach Boys.
Although I don't believe Brian Wilson was.
He may not have been with them then, huh? Yeah. He was one of the founders, however. He passed away at the age of 82. We just learned that. And really sad. What honestly, a musical genius was Brian Wilson. He had some struggles in his life, like we all do. His were, of course, because he's a celebrity. They were made public. I remember years ago, Rhino, watching a documentary, for lack of a better term to describe it, on the making of their hit Good Vibrations. Revolutionary musical achievement at the time. Now, the technology today, it's nothing. But the multiple tracks and the way they combined all that, it's just fascinating the way they did that. Way ahead of their time on that. And I think he was a big part of it. Brian Wilson, dead at 82. Man. So, the president has vowed to liberate Los Angeles amid the riots. Of course, so Gavin Newsom, he's striking back, is he not?
Well, he's trying.
He's at least trying to be a...
First try last night with his pre-recorded address to the nation.
That was terrible.
Was without audio.
I saw that. That was terrible, man.
Then they started it over with a color-corrected version.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Trying to make him look a little bit more tan.
So you got the president of the United States and a governor, happens to be the governor of the nation's largest state.
A governor that seems to have a problem with fibbing when it comes to phone calls.
What's up? Oh, yeah, he said he talked to
Trump said he talked to Newsom. Newsom said the call never happened. Trump posted a screenshot of where he called and he didn't answer. Then he called back and they talked for 16 minutes. But that's not even the first time he's lied about being on the phone with the president. You remember during the fires, was it the fire? I think it was the fires, yeah, where a constituent ran up to him while he was getting into his big SUV. And he had his phone in his hand. He said, I'm actually on the phone with President Biden right now. She goes, good, let me talk to him. And then he had to kind of back up and punt because he wasn't really on the phone with President Biden.
Well, it's not like there's not a record of that sort of stuff. So if you're going to go out and lie about it, are you not thinking about the fact that that could easily be refuted? I guess not.
I mean, we could always pull up the video of him when he was the mayor of San Francisco apologizing because he slept with his campaign manager's wife.
I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah.
was at one time married, of course, to Kimberly Guilfoyle, who used to be a regular contributor on Fox, and I thought had a thing going on with Donald Trump Jr., right? I think they were a thing. And in fact, she came to Mississippi, came to Johnny Morgan's place, good old boys and gals, before the last election, as I recall. And he was here, and so was she. I saw him, and she spoke for a long time as well. I haven't seen much about that lately. But, at one time, she was the first lady of San Francisco, if you will, when Gavin Newsom was the mayor. Little trivia there for you. The situation with health care that I was talking about earlier, just something I wanted to share that is an idea that comes from John Goodman. I've read Goodman's numerous books on health care. He's brilliant. He's a healthcare policy analyst on the conservative side of the ledger, has been for years. I want to say he was a fellow at the Heritage Foundation. But he came up with an idea I thought was pretty good, and that is to make Medicaid convert some of that into health savings accounts that would cover all primary care. And then the enrollees would be restricted to using the money for each given year. And with those funds, they'd pay market prices instead of the standard lower Medicaid fees at doctor's offices, walk-in clinics, urgent care centers. And they would essentially buy medical care, if you will, the same way that food stamps are used. So low-income families would have the same health care opportunities that middle-income families do. And what I'm talking about here, and you know this, Rhino, a lot of these primary care doctors don't accept Medicaid. Specialists especially don't. Many don't. But here's his idea. How about this one? At the end of the insurance period, they could withdraw any unspent money. The idea being, don't go to the dang doctor if you just got the sniffles. There's a tendency to do that when you know it doesn't cost you anything, right? It happens every day. Fills up the ERs, the various clinics, hospitals. You're not really sick, but you know it's free.
Some to the point where the doctors don't even prescribe an antibiotic. They just give them a prescription that they then take to the pharmacy, and the pharmacist looks at it and goes, yeah, that's Triaminic. It's over the counter over there.
So this really isn't a bad idea. Before you just go clog up the healthcare system unnecessarily, just think that whatever's left over, you get to keep. So it doesn't cost any more money, but we're taking the burden off the healthcare system so they can take care of really sick people. It's really not a bad idea. So the RAND Corporation did a study not so long ago that said these accounts could reduce Medicaid spending by 30%. That'd be $1 trillion over 10 years. And it would be shared by the savings would be shared by the beneficiaries and, of course, the taxpayers who pay for Medicaid. I thought it was a pretty good idea, honestly. Something we should consider here in the state of Mississippi. But more importantly, we ought to think about revising and reforming the Medicaid program at the federal level as such. I think it's pretty good. On the C Spire text line, Ben from Madison said, I had a chance to listen to the Lieutenant Governor's interview this morning with Richard Cross. Sounds pretty clear to me the Senate just isn't interested in major school choice expansion. I thought Thomas made a really good point this morning, questioning why there's such a divide from senators' constituents versus House members' constituents. One would think there wouldn't be such a divide considering they ultimately represent the same people collectively. I'll share my insights on that, in my opinion, I guess, more than insights, although some of it is driven, a lot of it's driven by actual interaction. It's the same in the House. The difference is the leader of the House, the Speaker of the House, supports it. And you know how powerful that can be with respect to the members. So there are members in the House that also overlap and align with senators in their opposition, but they go along because it's what the Speaker wants. And you know how the process works. And in the Senate side, there's some that oppose because it's what the Lieutenant Governor wants, but there are also many who support. And it does appear that there's a sharp contrast between the two. And here's my take on it, Ben. Let you think about this. And Rhino, you perhaps could weigh in as well. Constituents that live in districts with high-performing, high-quality schools don't want it, right? And constituents that live in the lower-performing school districts, generally speaking, do. It's just simple as that. And where there is fear among constituents that they will be overrun by nearby students that are enrolled in nearby schools, I should say, especially if they're of a different race, they oppose it. And so they put lots of pressure on their various representatives, be they in the House or Senate. And I think you and I could point to specifically to some races that were decided on the basis of the candidate's position on school choice. And in these cases, the candidate who opposed it is who won, aligning more with the constituents. The problem, in my view, I'll say it again, Ben, is comes down to race, and it comes down to those who want to protect their schools, feel like they're protecting their schools, even though they're really not, by opposing school choice, versus those that want options, want choice in other areas. Coming right back.
Well, we ran a couple of
So awesome! Middays with Gerard Gibert.
Come on, let's get on with the show.
On SuperTalk, Mississippi.
We could spend hours, and we have, not consecutively on the show, talking about the school choice issue. We got some text rolling in on that. Ben from Madison said, I'm very pleased the Speaker of the House is championing this issue. Maybe the next Lieutenant Governor will be more open to it. I know. Ben, again, working with these guys since 2014 in my capacity with Empower Mississippi, not as a paid lobbyist, but just championing these policies, long before I really got involved in all this stuff, of course, because I believe in the policy, and I believe in education freedom and education choice. This is a difficult state. And I've said it before, I'll say it again. It's because of the racial composition of the state makes things harder. It's easier in the neighboring states, I submit. Texas, it was hard in Texas for a variety of reasons, but they finally got it over the finish line. And there was a huge lobby against it. But finally, they got it done. Universal school choice. Now, they limited the amount available in the scholarship accounts, the savings accounts. But that continues to increase through the years. And Thomas, I'm sorry, man. You could get them on the record of where they stand. It's not like there's a secret about it. That's what why don't you get that, Thomas? You can easily find out where every member of the Senate stands right now. And they're comfortable with their position. And they're going to continue to get reelected with their position. It's not a secret. You don't have to have a vote. And as Rhino pointed out, you can have a special session, as you're suggesting, but they don't have to vote. They can sine die. You pointed that out. It's absolutely correct, the way the rules work. But it doesn't matter. We know where they stand. And there's some members of the House that'll tell you, yeah, I don't like this, but I'm doing this for the speaker. Because you know how the stuff works. If you don't, then you have problems getting your stuff across the finish line. So there is a lot of, that's the way the sausage is made. It's the way the process is designed. I'm not being critical of it. It's just the way it works. You want your stuff, you got to help me with this. That's the way it works. I don't know what else to say about it other than that's just the way our system works, whether it's in Washington or it's here at the state. And often it happens at the local level, too, with boards of supervisors and aldermen and city councils. Same deal. You help me with my issue, I'll help you with yours. That's fine. I don't have any objection to that. That's reasonable. But they're always thinking about, okay, there's a limit on that, because if I cross the line too much, it would cause me to, as they refer to it, as get my picture taken off the wall, right? They don't want that.
Which seems to be the priority for the vast majority.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's just part of being in political office is always thinking about the next one or the next cycle. But I agree with you, Ben. I'm going to keep working on it, and as are a lot of other people, to try to get something going. But it's not surprising. I didn't hear the interview with the lieutenant governor this morning. I'm not surprised that he really hasn't budged on that issue. I can't remember him ever saying anything remotely close to supporting school choice, except he did on our program earlier in the year during the session.
Half-heartedly.
Yeah, and it was about failing schools. Hey, maybe let those kids transfer to a different public school, but never has he indicated any support for anything beyond just very limited public school portability. And when you got 4 public school districts that are now D or F in the state, that doesn't really help very much. We got 140 school districts, so you're talking about a teeny tiny sliver of those who would have access to portability.
Maybe we should take a different angle on it.
What's that?
Maybe we should point out that those who are opposed to school choice are in league with the same type of people as Randy Weingarten.
Man,
the people that want more power for educators.
She went off on the deep end yesterday. Does she know
She
how
stays in the deep end. Good
grief. Does she know how to have a conversation without just yelling and screaming and jumping?
No.
I mean,
she's that excitable and neurotic.
I do think there's something going on there. She cannot have any sort of civil conversation. Just the bouncing up and down is what. And it's not like occasionally something riles her up. It's like every single time that's her delivery, is that jumping up and down and screaming and yelling at people. It's kind of crazy. On school choice, even if it was to pass and get signed into law, the NAACP would sue, and history says the courts would say it's unconstitutional. That's according to Mose. Maybe Mose, he said all because it's Mississippi, but they'd have the same problem in all the other states. I just don't see that would be the case. I could accept half of my child's tuition, says Andy, would help me tremendously. That's been talked about as well as partial scholarships. We'll get back on this again tomorrow. Thanks so much for joining us. Until then, stay safe and God bless.
SuperTalk Mississippi Media Production.